Great. I believe we are good. Welcome back, everyone. I am going to share my screen yet again. Bear with me here. Okay. And I'm going to be very transparent here, but Dana or Kathleen, are you around and in Miro to take notes? Going once, going twice.
I'm in Miro, but not in our thing.
Okay,
So,
can you?
Don't know why.
Meaning not where?
Not until our specific thing. It just
area?
says, looks like something went wrong.
Oh, okay, I see you. How about Kathleen? Are you in with us tonight? No. Okay, I got it. I will take the notes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the what we want to focus on here, which is what's working in scenario A and scenario B. What can we tweak? What do you want to tweak? So again, Jed is here, and maybe actually I'm going to stop sharing and just trust that I'll be taking notes. And Jed, do you want to share the dashboard in case people have questions about the scenarios? I think that's going to be important because certainly as we're talking about the demographics and who's impacted, you have that information more readily available than I do.
Yeah, I can share my screen. I've got the Miro board up too, if
Okay,
that's where we want to
that
start.
would be fantastic. And then I'll just be in Miro taking notes.
Yeah.
Okay. So who wants to share? What are some things that are working in this scenario and what are some things that aren't? Oh, if you guys have your hands up, I cannot see them. So right now, if you have your hand up and you want to speak, put your voice into the room.
I can start.
Okay,
I'll get us started. I think I'll start with something that's working. In proposal B in particular, there's like good geographic sense to it. I think there's some lines that could be moved, but I think it looks like there's good geographic connection between schools in terms of neighborhood connections. I think, again, some lines can be moved for sure to address some like crossing of busy roads. I think at least at our school at Atkinson, the removal of DLI is kind of a non-starter for our community. There is a deep desire to keep the co-located program alive.
Yep. Okay.
So I'll start there and we'll start conversation from those points. I'm sure people have plenty to share.
Okay. Thank you for monitoring your voice. Chris.
For Lane, we're really pleased that both proposals will increase our student body, and it will increase it by expanding our boundaries and giving us a contiguous community, and not attempting to do that by parachuting people in. Those are hopeful things to us, and we have a slight preference for A, but they both are we're really grateful for both of those things.
Anybody else? Anybody else want to talk about any Elizabeth? I see you've got your hand up.
Thank you. I like the idea of the consolidation of the DLI programs. It intuitively and intellectually makes sense about consolidating resources. I've also heard support from that from some other community members. I still want to raise the question about the assumption about whether Creston must remain within the Southeast Coalition or the Southeast area. And if that isn't kind of creating a forced conversation. I've heard concerns about, and I don't know which proposal this is, The catchment area of Hosford circling around the Franklin's High School as being problematic. And then there's some strong sentiments that having two DLI programs at Harrison Park could be unmanageable, and it could be actually just too much. So having two focused option schools and the neighborhood school all together could be too much. The other thing I heard was, sorry, there's a couple, I'm looking at my notes. The going under 500 for Mount Tabor, especially if it's just a short-term thing until something else happens. What that does to school resources and the stability of the programming that's happening there is a concern.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Anything else?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, will you share with us a little bit of the thinking of the Harrison Park community?
So I did meet with all, well, we tried to meet with all of our different language groups this week. And I did meet with our DLI families as well as our Chinese language speaking families. And they wanted me to share that they do have some concerns about the consolidation of DLI programs in terms of wanting to make sure that I shared that they feel it was important for their students to have exposure to many different kinds of children and not just students in the DLI program. So I definitely wanted to make sure that I shared that. And they also wanted to make sure that it was voiced, especially right now with a lot of the Asian hate and things going on, that they had some concerns about those schools perhaps being targeted. So I'm sharing that with the committee. Another piece that I got from Unity is, again, looking at the Jade District and the location of native Chinese speakers being in the neighborhood of Harrison Park or further east. They felt that that made sense to have a program in our neighborhood. So those are things that were shared with me from our DLI families. And I had a couple other parents that definitely expressed their gratitude towards the committee, thinking about them and keeping our kids as close together. Many of them still are like, we want our kids all in one building, but they understand the need for this shift. And they were just glad that there was room for them to be within walking distance from the two schools.
Thank you. What else? What are some tweaks? Oh, Oscar. Yes.
Hi, this is for both proposals, right? We could talk about?
Yeah. Either or both.
Okay. I really like proposal B in the sense that it is keeping the Spanish DLI at from Atkinson to Bridger. So you solidify that, and it went as far as to take it even to middle school. So kind of keeping that same model. And like I think I've talked about before, like all those wraparound services of counselors and therapists and, you know, psychologists and all of that at the middle school level as well. I think it's pretty ridiculous to have two languages in middle school. I think we, in proposal B, Chinese, I think, and Spanish, just because that kind of takes away from what we're trying to do, I think, here. Unless you have some trilingual people out there that I don't know about, I think that's set up to fail.
Okay. Sam, I see your hand is up.
Hi, yes, thank you. I just wanted to reiterate, if we're talking about tweaks, just to try and factor in physical boundaries as much as database boundaries and you know, traffic, main arteries,
streets.
something that sort of ladder up to a vision zero type of environment. As long as we're tweaking things, it would be nice to weigh that accordingly. That's essentially my input for right now. Thank you.
Beth.
I was just trying to remember which scenario it's in, but I do have a concern or a question about the proposal that has Spanish immersion split between 2 middle schools with 2 small programs. Because what I've heard from some middle school principals is that that having a small DLI program within a larger school can, especially if it's only one strand, like I think what the Spanish program is at Mount Tabor right now, that that can limit access to electives for students who are in that program, and also can contribute to sort of a like school within a school segregation. Like they're just not able to mix as much because there are those 2 DLI classes are only able to be offered once a day. Whereas if there are multiple strands, then the kids there's more choices there's more flexibility in the scheduling so that the community can be more cohesive and that the kids in the different programs can be more integrated. So I guess I'm saying I like the one where the Spanish immersion program is all in one middle school and the Chinese immersion program is all in one middle school. I'm concerned about the one that splits Spanish immersion between 2 different middle schools.
I believe proposal B is the one that splits them across 2 middle schools. Is that right, Jen?
Is correct. Yes, it does.
So to get to your
So
point.
it kind of does both of those things, Beth, in that it has Chinese DLI at Lane consolidated, but then the split. So yeah, hearing that kind of shows up maybe in a way that could be consolidated into a single derivative of these.
And I understand that that Lane also has Russian immersion. However, that's going to be a small middle school strand, whatever school it's in. So I don't know a solution for that because it's just such a small program. But I don't know if that compounds it to have 2 in. If you have 2 DLI programs in one middle school, is it better if they're similar in size, or if one of them is tiny and one of them is big? See, I don't know, or bigger.
Sandra, you've got your hand up. What are some tweaks?
I'm not going to restate any of my previous
Appreciate that.
criticisms,
Yeah.
but I do want them incorporated in the record here.
Mhm.
I am a little confounded by what only I can describe as the gerrymandering in proposal A for drawing boundaries. We've got not quite the pirate patch that you see in Texas, but there are some pretty incredible lengths gone to here to balance out from the Res J lens. You can't see it so much here, but you know what I'm talking, there's like weird tweaks in places. And while I appreciate the fact that that accomplishes balancing out some numbers, I don't think it's sustainable. People move, neighborhoods change, and I think it's important that our boundary lines fall along more natural lines in whatever proposal we put forth. So that's my basic comment. I don't even know.
Proposal A.
Yeah, and proposal A, the boundary lines seem to be a little bit
More
of a
arbitrary.
stretch in some schools. I'm not seeing it here.
Okay. Jed, is there any insight you can add there about how those proposal lines or boundary lines were created in proposal
Yeah.
A?
Sandra's right on that the enrollment balancing was the primary driver for this. So it did create what I agree are some, and I think that Arleta is the example that pops out to me as having kind of some weird looking shapes that are not concentric around the school in particular, but that is the reason to get to that minimum 270 enrollment.
And Arleta wasn't even who I was thinking about, funny enough, but yeah, there was, I appreciate the explanation.
The Hosford boundary that incorporates Atkinson is incredibly, it feels very disconnected.
Agree.
That's in proposal A, right?
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Yes.
So Hosford incorporates Atkinson. So we said Hosford. Okay. Anybody else?
Can I just request that we get Bridger maps in general? I know they don't have a neighborhood boundary, but just for future iterations, it's impossible for me to see where the Bridger boundary used to lie, and I think that's important information for all of us.
Yes, thank you.
You know, I was like kept looking and looking for where I could find Bridger, and I couldn't do it. So just a request for future. I know it does in either proposal, it becomes no neighborhood program, but it would be nice to see like what the
At
old
least
boundary
historically
was,
where
at
it
least on the
was.
big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And like, there's still data on the left that's useful, I think,
Mhm.
on the single pagers. So.
I'm assuming that's easy to do. Jed?
I would not be the exact person to do it, so I can't speak to how easy it
Well,
is.
not easy. It is something we can do.
Yes, it is within the realm of
It
possibility.
is within the realm of possibility. Thank you. Okay. Anything else in terms of tweaks or who's, kind of what are tweaks we can make, or what are things that concern you that you think are impacting the greatest benefit to the most impacted communities? Harmony.
Sorry, and I will yield my time if other folks who haven't talked would like to.
I feel like we've done a really good job of getting our voices
it's good
around.
balance, but still, I know I went first too. So I am interested in a little more information about where single strands are and like how the different demographic shifts happen at those schools where there are single strands. Like I know at Atkinson, our single strand of immersion has lower SES than the neighborhood, but I think at Bridger, the neighborhood strand has higher SES than it's hard for me to tell, but I think I think it would be helpful to see, like maybe while single strand immersion works at Atkinson, maybe it makes sense for Bridger to grow to become a whole school DLI with Bridger neighborhood, growing, because Bridger is a relatively small school population wise. There might be options there too. Just throwing out ideas of ways to both accomplish like the like whole school DLI goals and also and leave single strands where they work. Just to brainstorm.
Okay, I appreciate that. I do want to give, is there anyone else that hasn't spoken yet that wants an opportunity to speak? Okay, then I will go back to, I believe Sandra, you had your hand up, and then we'll go to you, Beth, and then to you, Elizabeth. Go ahead, Sandra.
I just have two quick notes. The first is, I know I've raised this many times, but in this context, I feel it needs to be raised again, that the Whitman neighborhood program is one of the only schools that goes to Whitman, then to Lane, and then to Cleveland. And given the emphasis placed on cohorts and on our Res J lens, we're talking about a lower SES school where these students form bonds in a middle school program, and then their elementary schools peeled off to an entirely different, much higher SES high school. So just to bring that one up again. And then the second point being something I don't know that is even solvable, because just by nature of the way cities are concentrated by population into the center here, as we adjust these boundaries, I see a lot of eastward shift, and just by nature, our inner core cities schools tend to have more resources. And so it feels like we're peeling off the lower SES students at a lot of these schools and sending them outward to eventually to lower SES schools where we're lowering their SES overall in a lot of cases. So just sort of a general statement there. That's it.
Okay, I believe Beth, you were next.
Yeah, I actually want to piggyback on that a little bit, because the map that was shown earlier in the meeting really demonstrated how the over-enrolled or high enrollment schools in our region are the ones that are not included in this process. So I'm very confused about how those will be addressed without then re-impacting everybody we're dealing with right now. Or are we just saying, that's okay, they can be overcrowded, and those are all of our highly resourced, affluent schools, mostly on the inner Southeast anyway. So that is just sort of another question I have about this process is, I don't understand how the math works out, how we take all of the sort of schools that are under enrolled and we deal with them all at once. And then we look at later at some point in the future, or not at all, I'm not sure when they get addressed, then we talk about the schools with over enrollment. Like how does that math work out? I don't understand.
Okay. Let me see if Jed can answer that. Is there anything any insight you can provide on that, Jed?
Yeah, so I mean, the study area design is really something that we take direction from the district on. So, you know, we have the schools that we have to balance, and those schools like Abernathy, Llewellyn, Dunaway, we've been instructed to not impact those boundaries within this process. So those are kind of the guardrails that we're working within this process.
Yeah, no, I understand that that's not a flow question, but
Okay.
that's more of a district question. But and then I guess I just wanted to comment that I do appreciate how in scenario A, I feel like the targets, the 80%, the 270, like those things sort of all get hit, especially for our BIPOC students and the students we're trying to center here, that they're not in overcrowded schools, they're not in under-enrolled schools in scenario A. And then in scenario B, I see that there are a little bit more, it's a little bit less on that target, but on some of the criteria, but that overall, or a lot of that scenario seems to be a better starting place to me. Like there just seems to be more logical boundaries and just things that sort of fit together better in scenario B. So I don't know if that's something that the tweaking can sort of get us closer to those targets in scenario B. But then there's also some giant sort of big pieces still hanging out there that makes me wonder how effective it is to be spending time on tweaks at this point anyway, if we're still saying we might do away with the whole school DLI model, or we may, I mean, it sounds like changes for reconsideration of CSS is not in the cards, but you know, it's like, I'm not sure that we're ready for tweaks.
Yeah, that's a good point. Chris, I understand you. Can you shine a little bit more light around the question that you put in the chat? Do we want to have a big SES disparity or more of a gradual one? I'm just trying to get to what you were getting at with your question.
If I understood correctly, there was a comment made that when we peel off the eastern side of more affluent attendance areas from, for example, Selwood, and send them to Lane, are we not, we're concentrating a higher SES group at Selwood. But I mean, I think the alternative, it seems like a better plan to me as a part of a Lane family to have folks that are not so widely different in socioeconomic status moving into a lower SES school than to have a big disparity. That was my thought.
I gotcha. Okay. And I understand we're asking you to hold two concurrent plans, which is help us think about how we tweak scenario A and scenario B. And then our very next group is going to be what should be the drivers for scenario C, right? So understand that there might be big modeling changes, but we're trying to kind of keep those all moving in a concurrent path. Elizabeth, thank you for patiently waiting. And then Chris, I will get back to you after that.
Thanks. So I guess the question is, when I look at this, these, what I'm seeing is point in time comparisons, right? And is it possible, I'm not even sure this question will make sense, to look at change as it shifts from where we are now to where we will be in the scenario. So what's the percentage change in student movement per school? Like, what's the percentage change in SES status by school? Not just what the numbers are, what percentage they are at a point in time, but what is the change that would happen as a result of the implementation? That, for me, is a more useful analytical tool than looking at it at a point in time.
So say it again. So you're saying not just percentage change, but individual numbers? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, these percentages are the percentages for both A and B are the projections of what will be once the change happens.
Correct.
Right. What I'm looking for is what is the change between as things are now
Oh, yes.
and
I'm with you.
scenario B, as we are now, and scenario
Yeah,
A, so we
so-
can measure the change of the, so we
I'm
can
with
measure
you.
the change of the change.
Of the change, yes. So we talked very much about that. Jed,
Yeah.
this
So,
this is Jed's jam right now.
I know,
yeah.
right?
Thank you. Yeah. So the thing that I like to do to answer this question is actually flip between the years of the forecast here to see how that plays out. And I had been, as you may have seen, kind of honing in on that point that Chris was making around Selwood and Lane. And I was specifically looking at, hey, what's the Lane neighborhood low income percentage currently? And how does that change for neighborhood? And we see that it goes down for the
Can you
2021.
make this just a little bigger?
I wish.
Okay.
I'm sorry. There's like just not a zoom function
It's all right.
for this.
So
But
you're saying in 2025, it goes up in
well,
proposal
right.
B.
Yeah. So I mean, you've kind of got to hold those numbers, and I jot them down sometimes. But yeah, I'm looking at 47.1 in 2021 in the current configuration.
Okay.
And then I'm looking at 42.5 for the 2021 projection in proposal B. Now I can flip that over to 2025 and see how that changes. So it doesn't change in the current configuration, right? And we see that it's just a slight change for the 2025 here, just because there's really, I think in this area, a slight decrease in students, but not a really big decrease in students here. And you can actually see that play out in the 2021 forecast enrollment numbers here as well. So neighborhood.
What were the total numbers? Could we look at the total numbers though for Lane, not just the neighborhood program?
Yes.
Right,
So
because those change, right? Because they different programs feed.
They absolutely do. Yeah. So you can look at the 2021 forecast, which in the current state has Lane at 406 total, and then forecasted for 2025 to drop to 363 if nothing were to change. In proposal B, which I have as the comparison right now, you see that 2021 starts at 661. And this is the proposal that has Chinese DLI and Russian DLI there as well. And then actually just goes down a little bit to 649 in 2025.
So
But the SES data, right? Like the percent of low income goes from 44% to 33% overall, right? Like there's a
absolutely, and that's in large part because of what you're adding
The Russian
from
deal.
from the dual language immersion standpoint. Yep.
So my question, so I understand how I can do it school by school. But if I'm being asked to do it school by school for where we are baseline scenario A, scenario B, that's a tremendous amount of work for me to kind of map out change. Because what I'm trying to understand is what is the change and what is the impact based on scenario A and scenario B. And can Flow Analytics do that for me instead of me having to toggle between 2021 and 2028 or whatever that out, because that's a tremendous amount of work.
Yeah.
I get it.
Well,
And
yeah, I think
but it's
Elizabeth,
a useful tool.
Yeah, I think we would want to talk about how, what that product looks like for you, because there's a lot of schools. It could be maybe a filterable spreadsheet or something like that, but yeah, I'd want to just learn a little bit more as to what you're trying to get at, and we could do that offline. Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah, so
in a nutshell, I just want to measure the impact of the change.
Right.
Gotcha.
So what I think I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, Elizabeth, is for all 21 schools, what are the current demographics today, 2021, and what are their demographics in 2021, and then what are their current demographics in 2026 in proposal A and proposal B?
I just shared a spreadsheet. It's simple. Andy Jacob put it together just for the schools with Spanish DLI, Bridger, Atkinson, Lent. It just looks at historically underserved and SES rates, but it does that it's like current proposal A, proposal B.
Yeah, it does.
It would be.
I just opened that. Is that the major enrollment program changes 2000 to 2020? Or is that a different one? I think
It's the
that's a
wrong
different
link.
one. Okay.
It is. Hold on.
Okay, that's good. I appreciate that.
But yeah, we can move on.
Yeah.
I think
okay.
Jed's
There you go.
shaking his head. He's like,
I got it.
We got
Absolutely
it.
got it.
There's,
Yeah.
thank you.
there's the right one.
Thank you, Harmony.
Sorry, everybody.
That's
Yeah.
okay. And thank you, Andy, for pulling that together. But I think that what I was asking for on your behalf is what you're looking for, right, Elizabeth? Okay. And I think we can get that. Oscar, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I know this is going to add more work to Jed if he's willing to take this on. I think something we haven't touched on, and I haven't heard it at all, has to do with test scores. You know, because I think that's an indicator, you know, of quality education, right? And I think going back to my comment about that and how some of these schools are doing or not doing, I think that would definitely be a good indicator as to some of the priorities too of how things were moving or how we can move it to kind of level everything out a little bit.
Yeah, that's a cool idea, Oscar. And I'm thinking about the data that we use to build this, which is student level. And I think I'd have to check in with district staff as to if there's even that level of information that's available, or how we could overlay school level information with what is fundamentally based on, you know, students moving around with boundary changes in programs and that sort of thing. So we need to think on that a bit.
Okay. We are about to go back. I think I got the 1 minute warning. We've got 21 seconds.
Can I just quickly say, Mr. Oscar, we do have some test data. We didn't test the last 2 years, but we have previous years for SBAC.
I just want to say thank you for this conversation, everybody. This has felt like.
There it goes. I just want to take a moment before we start to just thank you all for really doing a good job of monitoring airtime tonight, being sure everybody's getting some equal airtime. So I now have to move in my Miro board to where we are talking about this. So I'm going to share my screen.
And while you're pulling that up,
yeah,
I just want to say, Karina, I think you're giving Flo a little bit too much credit in how much we get to dictate what will show up in this.
Fair enough.
So
yeah,
we take our direction from this guiding coalition and then through the district.
Okay. So what do you want to give the district and Flo as kind of direction as we carry this work forward, right? So what are some key considerations or drivers that should inform this new scenario? Come on, this is your opportunity to shape the scenario. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm still just kind of getting past the, like, I don't feel like PPS has modeled that to us yet in terms of giving us the priorities and how the drivers that they chose for the other scenarios meet the criteria. So I'll get there, but I'm just still a little bit like wrestling with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask what you consider to be the drivers for our other two proposals, so that we might have an idea of what we're looking for.
Fair enough. So, and Jed, correct me if I'm wrong, please. Esther, correct me if I'm wrong, because I was not involved in that effort, but from our meeting last time, what I remember was, I mean, obviously in that scenario, or in those scenarios, the big goals were moving Harrison Park from a K-8 to a K-8 to a elementary school, middle school model, increasing enrollment at Lane, driving again, a scenario that pushed the whole school DLI to where there are greater concentrations of native speakers, and another one that moved it to where those programs currently are. And then I can't remember, I don't know the one for CSS, but in terms of kind of the ResJ goals, I don't know, Dr. O, what drove that for PPS?
So let me jump in. One of the things that we looked at as a driver was, of course, the phase 2 charge. So in considering the phase 2 charge, turning Harrison Park into a middle school means, of course, we have to separate the K-5 students. Harrison Park in phase 1, and I think Beth, you might remember this conversation, had said they wanted to remain a K-8, and they were going to allow us to split the school on condition that we could find a location that was close to the middle school so their students could continue to walk to school. Well, the location that is close to the school happens to be the building that houses CSS. So to put K-5 in that CSS building, we have to find a home for CSS.
Yeah, I'm completely clear on that piece.
Yes. So
You want to understand the Res J impact.
Yeah.
right?
So
Yeah.
but then what happens, of course, as you know, is that once you separate the K-5 from the 6-8 at Harrison Park, the 6-8 becomes a very small number.
Yeah.
In order for us to then build a robust middle school program, we have to also increase the number at Harrison Park. And we also do have to increase the number at Lane, knowing also that we do have crowded middle schools like Mount Tabor and Hartsford. So those were the considerations. And in looking at those considerations, we then looked at the language aspects of it and which DLIs could work together.
Yeah, I think Dr. O, I don't, and correct me if I'm wrong, Beth and the rest of the group. I don't think people are necessarily wanting to hear the number drivers or kind of the model drivers in terms of DLI, but more what were the educational outcomes? What were the Res J drivers? I think is what they were looking for. Now,
But they're intertwined.
Okay.
Okay. So I mean,
The numbers.
They're intertwined because you cannot talk about racial equity and social justice if you cannot provide robust programs that other students enjoy somewhere else.
okay, so that's the piece that I want to hear, right? Like we need to make sure that we have robust enrollment and balanced enrollment across these middle schools so that students in all of them are getting equitable access to programming and whatever resources, even though these schools are serving different populations and they're not, and we've got some with more low-income students and more students of color, and we've got others that have a richer, wider population. And so those are the kinds of things. And then I guess the piece that I feel like, I mean, I'm sorry to be a broken record, but like, I just haven't heard anything about the racial justice, like that explanation that you just gave. I haven't heard that for how for the placement decisions around creative science and keeping it a K-8 rather than considering it as a K-5. I have heard some of those considerations for the DLI thought processes. That's the big hole that I'm missing is where are those about CSS?
Yes, I hear you on that, Beth, on scenarios A and B. And I understand that people want that. What I'm trying to get at is we now have the ability to create whatever drivers we want for scenario C. What should those be? Elizabeth. I couldn't actually, Elizabeth or Sandra, I'm going to have one of you police whose hand was up first because I don't know. I am trying to take notes here.
I think Sanderson was up first.
Okay.
My first three would be that we don't have any single strand DLI schools.
Okay, so that's a good driver, right? We don't want single strand DLIs. Okay, good.
That we observe the target minimum enrollments that PPS has stated. I think it's 270 at the elementary school level and 500 at the middle school level.
Okay.
And that creative science be looked at as a K-5 as a possibility.
Thank you, Sandra. Those are very clear. Okay. Elizabeth.
So I think my questions would be, so that it was very helpful, Esther, to hear you explain what happened at Harrison Park. And specifically, it was like Harrison Park wanted to stay K-8. They agreed not to be K-8 on the condition that the K-5 be located in proximity to the existing Harrison Park. That drove the decision to go to Clark, right? That So that makes sense to me. And I am wondering what other drivers exist like that, those are guide rails, right? We made a promise to Harrison Park about where their K-5 would be located. Creston was made a promise that they would flow to Kellogg, I understand, in the first iteration of the scenario. CSS has been made a guarantee that they will remain whole. So those are all guide rails and those are all drivers. And I think there's a few of those that may still be invisible to some of us. And that's what I want to see is explicit. Like, what are the things that are influencing our decisions in the background? And I question some of that, right? Because is that we keep taking things have been taken off the table that limit our ability to make decisions. If the things that are taken off the table result in better equity outcomes, that's great. If they're being taken off the table and just making this activity harder, I think we need to question them.
Thank you. Okay, we got that. Or I'm going to assume Kathleen, or you're capturing that. Anybody, Oscar? And then I'm coming to you next, Sam.
Yeah, I think back to my comment about test scores, just quality education, right? I think if everybody had quality education, I think a lot of people would just be like, yeah, let's just keep it as is. Why do we have to change things? But it sounds like Elizabeth mentioned, there's some promises that were made. So hence we need to make some moves. So I think DLI, multiple strands from K-5, middle school, I think is important. I think in both scenarios, you either have Vietnamese and Roseway Heights and Spanish, and then some other like Chinese and Spanish, another one, you know, just all of these different languages in one place, I think kind of takes away from what we talked about before. So I think that. And I really want to push for PPS to do a grow your own program with Spanish. I think we're at a need for Spanish teachers. So how can we use this Southeast Guiding Coalition to create a program that we could grow, essentially just grow our own program. And I think the strongest connection is Franklin and Atkinson as a high school and a middle and an elementary school. I don't know of another, you know, like we're not touching McDaniels, we're not touching, you know, these other schools. So, and I think something like that would be awesome.
Thank you. Sam, what could another driver be?
Hello, everybody. I'd like to include the driver of keeping Creative Science School in the Southeast region.
Relative to just keeping it in Southeast, right?
Under the assumption that, under the assumption that the guardrail is in place where Harrison Park is being split, and
Sure.
the geographic proximity is still in the equation. Of course, the guardrail, another driver would just be remain, but under the assumption that move is changing, I'd just like to advocate for that. Thank you.
In Southeast as a whole. Okay, Harmony?
I think it's an important guardrail to have geographic connection between our students and their schools. I know it's not always possible and there's always exceptions. Our schools aren't located aren't evenly distributed, but to the extent possible that we could keep kids with safe routes to schools, not crossing major thoroughfares where possible. And that fundamentally, when we look at the boundaries and look at the feeder patterns and things like that, that they make sense, right? That we're not putting on kids on buses that go past other schools, that we're not, just kind of a fundamental, does it make sense when you look at it, that it's not these little carved out pieces, and that, we recognize that there are fundamental qualities and benefits to families living in proximity to their neighborhood schools or even their special program schools, right? Like the keeping CSS in the Southeast, right? So that parents and families have access to those schools.
Okay. Thank you. Christy, I'll come back to you, Oscar.
I guess I just had a question about the K-5 piece. I'm assuming the K-5 piece is we're assuming if CSS was kept at K-5 that it could stay in the building with the Harrison Park. But if we're saying we want the guardrail of 2 DLI strands, I don't know that elementary K-5 CSS and elementary K-5 Harrison Park and 2 DLI strands fit in the Clark building with a capacity of 500. So I think we're thinking the K-5 is solving the problem of capacity, but I'm not sure that it does. So I think we need to answer that question.
I didn't put that forth as part of the guardrail, just that CSS could be considered as a K-5, not that CSS should be considered to remain in the building. Just the guardrail I put forth was
Right.
just
I think Christy, what people were getting at, or what I've heard from previous meetings, is this the concern around the impact to folks who want a comprehensive middle school model, specifically in the Arleta and Woodstock neighborhoods,
as well as how dramatically those neighborhood boundaries would have to be reduced in order to have all of those programs. So if the 6-8 wasn't there, that would also allow more of the neighborhood students to remain.
Okay, I need some clarification before we go too much farther. So where are we putting the 6-8 kiddos from CSS then? So they're not going to be floating around, so where are they going to be?
Yeah, I think that would have, if there is a scenario that is created that has CSS at a K-5, not a K-8, then we would need to be able to figure out where 6-8 goes as part of that scenario, Michelle.
I feel like the question would then be, does CSS convert to a K-5 school only, or is the 6-8 housed in a different location? That would be the question.
Well, and then I guess my other question then is, so I thought CSS has a specific way of teaching. And so are they going to be incorporated in with like Harrison Park or Kellogg or Lane, because they have a thing? So those kids, do they just stop that thing at 5th grade and then they go into neighborhood schools 6th, 7th, and 8th?
Yes, that would be the proposal, right? Because they would have to stop it going into high school is the thought. Oscar.
the other side of the coin. We're asking students who are not part of that thing to suddenly become part of that thing. So I think it's fair to look at both questions.
I just was trying to figure out, because I'm more worried about the kiddos, where they're going. And I understand that wrong wording, my apologies, but I was worried about what the littles were going to be doing if we're moving it to a K-5. They're still littles that are in 6th, 7th, and 8th. And I was just curious where they were going. That was it.
Mine was just a quantitative, not a qualitative statement, just that we'll need to look at both. If that's the guardrail, we need to examine both.
I hear you, Sandra. Now, I want to give equity of voice to other folks. So, Oscar.
It's kind of going back to CSS as well. And I'd like to keep them in Southeast. And I want to be specific though, because when we talk Southeast, there's a difference between around 82nd, 92nd Southeast, or, route, inner Southeast. So I think it's great that we have that option, farther east than these other places. And again, I haven't looked at the numbers or anything, but I think, there's a really good triangle down there at Widmer, Kelly, and Whitman that CSS might be able to go to and then go to Lane. I don't know. It seems like there's a cluster there. I don't know how utilized they are, but I'm just thinking about that.
Okay. Christy. And I'm just going by hands up order. So if those of you, I know Chris, you usually give me one of these. If you want to speak, just give me a wave. Go ahead,
Oh, sorry, I just didn't take my hand down from before.
Okay. Dr. O, is your hand up from before, or do you have a new comment?
Well, I was just going to comment to say that, what was the comment? I can't even remember. It's been a while.
Anyone else? Any other drivers we need to be considering here?
Chris has her hand up.
Okay, Chris, sorry.
Thanks. I really, I like our original drivers. I would really like, I would like I would like Whitman and Lane to not end up being a way to solve the problems of people who, I don't know how to say this well. We would really like to not have programs dropped into us. We would like to, but there's just so much history around trying to solve problems in low income schools by putting in, well, let's put in the creative science people because, they can make things better it still feels like a deficit model to me when that happens in schools like mine, like Whitman and Lane. So I would like to encourage us not to think of it in that way and to not try to solve enrollment problems by parachuting programs in.
Okay. Anybody else in terms of other drivers? Anything, Dr. Proctor, that you want to add? I know one of the questions that we had here in the room prior to you joining us was specifically around what were the drivers, what are some of the Res-J drivers that the district considers as important drivers for the creation of this third scenario?
The drivers that are going to be important to consider are when it comes specifically to DLI versus co-location. When we talk about co-located programs with an English Scholar program, which represents non-DLI program students, either from the neighborhood or in proximity in the school, they tend to represent Black and BIPOC students. And coming into PPS, what I see clearly as an education professional is that we have years of data and past data that show clearly that the students in a co-located program are not performing at the same rate as the students that are in the DLI program. So what needs to happen is a deeper focus on the academic outcomes for all students. With the DLI program, also it's important for us to note and understand that when we look at DLI programs across the country, the most successful DLI programs are those that are whole school DLI. It allows for more cohesion of programmatic elements. It allows for teachers to plan collaboratively. It allows for a deeper immersion within the program across the whole school. Operationally, there are some operational elements that make running a whole school DLI program more successful, or in respects to then trying to manage two programs in one as a leader. So anyway, most DLI programs that are successful are in a whole school setting. And what I see here at PPS in a model of co-locating, there's not a intensive focus academically and instructionally on the two programs equitably. And what we see across those models is that the English Scholar, the Black and BIPOC students who are not in DLI program are not achieving at the same rates.
Thank you, Dr. Proctor. I know we pulled you from another room, so.
And I would like to go back to the other room because there was no other
please
person in that room. Yeah.
Please do.
Okay.
So you wanted to also know the driver, Karina. In essence, the long and short of it is student academic achievement. The purpose of the dual language program is to ensure that our students become biliterate and bilingual. And for as long as we don't have the resources and the supports to develop that level of expertise and efficacy amongst our teachers, that goal is directly impacted. So that's another driver. So how do we get our teachers there? How do we provide the supports and the opportunities for our kids through an immersion system?
Okay. Beth.
You say Beth.
Yes, I did.
As a driver, I'd like to consider that list that Harmony shared by accident before, the historic transitions and impacts that individual school communities have faced. And when we're prioritizing, sort of think about how many road transitions and how much action has this community already done in the recent
How much upheaval have communities already been asked to bear recently? Okay, as a driver. Thank you, Beth. Harmony.
Yeah, I have a question so I appreciate Dr. Proctor's explanation about whole school DLI. I'd like to see some numbers. I know that we don't see, like, you know, academic achievement is different in a DLI program period, right? Like students meet their peers at 3rd grade and then surpass their peers in middle school or something like that. So it's hard to measure academic achievement, like how well it's going in our co-located programs versus like how well it could go in a whole school DLI. And I'm curious if we're seeing, like, if our DLI kids are outperforming their peers in middle school period when they come from elementary programs, are we seeing those issues, or is that not a true outcome that I've heard or read about in terms of, I just want to be able, I think Dr. Proctor should come talk to our community of DLI parents because they need that information about why this will be better for their kids, because that's what it comes down to. They feel like they're in a good school and a good program, and we're struggling to share that. And I think Dr. Proctor certainly made a good argument. I have questions too.
Right, you want to be able to push deeper into that. Okay. Anybody else? We've got, I think, under 5 minutes. Anyone else have any other drivers they want to be thinking about? Leah, can you think of any drivers we need to be thinking? Oh, Melissa.
The director of K-5 language arts and social studies now, but for the past 4 years, I was the principal at Bridger.
Yeah.
And so I can speak to Bridger's data for those 4 years. And it was a K-8 during that time. So, and we have previously in phase 1, I was part of the whole phase 1, looked at the data for our schools. So Bridger and many of our DLI schools are either targeted support schools or comprehensive support schools. So with the state, so that means that there are, for Bridger, that meant there were some groups of students who were not being successful. For Bridger, it was special education students and Black students. So when you look at the data for our DLI students, it's not, we're not doing a great job with our DLI schools students. And then for Bridger, then our neighborhood students were doing only about 30% of our students were being successful.
Okay.
So during that time, so you have 2 different needs, 2 different programs having needs. And so there's always this tension of 2 programs with 2 separate needs, fighting for the same resources, the time. There's always going to be compromises with professional development, with resources. And so currently what we have been doing with our DLI co-located programs is not being successful. So I think we need to be thinking about what do we need to do to become successful. I don't think we want to say that we want to get rid of DLI programs, right? So that's really important to us. And so like looking at other successful DLI programs, what are they doing, across the nation? What are they doing that we're not?
Right.
One of those things, like Dr. Proctor says, is that most DLI schools across the nation are DLI schools. They're not co-located.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa. Hassan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. No, and I apologize. I was trying to look through the sticky notes to see if anything had around this had been said, and then Melissa said it. Really, I think hitting on what Dr. Proctor said and what Dr. O said as well. I think it was really, and Melissa articulated, it was really the resource allocation. And I think that really can't be overstated as an important driver, just from the perspective of resources are finite, whether it be time, whether it be funding, and how do we make sure that the limited resources that are available at a school site are able to be the most impactful on student achievement.
Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you, Melissa and Cheryl. I'll pass the thanks on to Cheryl. All right, I think they're going to close us here in a minute. Anyone else want to have any parting thoughts relative to drivers that we should consider?
Yeah, I just want to say something too, that I hope we do these programs where it's full immersion, and I definitely would like to see and hear how PPS is going to help support it and not have it fail, right? Like they're going to have a concentration of students there of color, and what are we going to do? What are we going to do more than, right? How are we going to be not equal but equitable when it comes to these students that are there?
Thank you. All right, y'all, they're going to push us back through the wormhole to the other room. Thank you, everybody, for your time tonight. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. So we'll see you in the larger room.